They're appealing the decision. They know they're going to lose. We know they're going to lose. They know that we know they're going to lose, but they're still appealing. And that makes zero sense. Why are they doing that? Listen to what Legault said Friday. He said that they're going to explain why they're doing it later on.
Yeah.
Since when do you decide what you're doing and then you find arguments to decide where you're going? Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
They're doing it just to polarize again, to poke people, to divide Quebecers, like they've done on immigration, like they've done on all sorts of issues since they've been in government. And this needs to stop.
Éric Duhem, leader of the Conservative Party of Quebec, was in our studios yesterday, and he took aim at how the provincial government, François Legault's government, says it will appeal the ruling on Bill 40. And of course, Bill 40, that was the Quebec's government's attempt to get rid of our English school boards and replace them with service centers. Let's find out a little bit more on this. Joe Ortona is the chair of the English Montreal School Board. He's on the line. Joe, welcome back to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
First things first, is Éric Duhem your new best buddy?
Well, in politics, sometimes you have people with whom you have certain agreements with, and you can form alliances there, and sometimes you have disagreements on other issues. So certainly whenever any leader of any provincial party is going to come out and speak in defense of preserving and protecting the rights of the English-speaking community, I will agree with them on those specific points. On other points, well, I may or I may not.
So let me ask you, you heard Duhem's take, direct to the point here. What's your take on those comments, the Premier on Friday saying, yep, we're going to appeal. You'll find out eventually why, but we're going to appeal. What's your take?
Look, my take is very simple. This judgment didn't leave anything in the gray. And in fact, the judgment itself doesn't really create a whole lot of new law here. This is pretty much established jurisprudence from the Supreme Court of Canada from 30 years ago. So we expected this and we've been saying that since the beginning. I mean, the judgment took very long to get, 2 years, and because of that, maybe there was some doubt at some point, but we were always very confident that we would win. We made that very clear. The fact that the government has now, announced that they're appealing in this way, and they're appealing everything. They're basically saying, the judge who rendered the decision got everything wrong. To me, just shows that, they have no grounds, no legal grounds. They don't expect to win this appeal. They know they're not going to win this appeal. They're trying to garner support by simply creating another court battle with the English-speaking community, and somehow they think that this is a road to success in politics in Quebec, and maybe it is. I don't know, but certainly from a moral standpoint, that's not grounds to appeal a judgment.
So the interesting thing here, and why we brought up Éric Duhem's public support yesterday, is because I feel we need some francophone voices on this one. Let's just call it as it is. This law also applied to francophone school boards. They no longer exist. They turned to service centers, and it seemed like francophones just didn't care, right? But these, of course, on the English side, this is one of our last institutions we control. Is there any way to curry some more favor amongst francophones? Because it seems to me to make this case, you're going to need support from them.
Yeah. So. For the most part, you're right. Francophones didn't really care, but Francophones that were engaged in the school system did care. And they were very clear from the beginning that this would have a negative impact on education in the French sector, on, the governance model would have a negative impact. And it turns out that they were right. And many of them are speaking out and saying just that. 3 years later, now that we've had the time to see what their governance model is and how it was supposed to work. And there seems to be this, I don't want to say anger. I think anger is too strong a word, but there seems to be this sense from the French-speaking Quebecers that, the system now, this judgment makes the system unfair, that the English-speaking community has all these benefits and that we don't have because Bill 40 abolished, the French school boards. But we need to remind all Quebecers that the reason why we have this inequitable system is because it's the government of Quebec that chose to adopt Bill 40. What we went to court to say is these are our constitutional rights, and you must preserve, these models when it comes to English education. You must preserve elections. You must preserve school boards with elected representatives, elected by the people in that community. Nothing says that the French majority can't have that either. We didn't take that away from them. It was Legault who took it away from them. So my hope is that, people will eventually be able to see and fight and say, no, the English community is entitled to this, and so are we. And maybe they can fight to have that equal system between the two languages.
When people are in a dispute and someone will say, I'll show them, wouldn't a great way for the English Montreal School Board, for all English school boards, couldn't you really show them if the next time there's an election that rolls around, we see outrageous, tremendous turnout? And is there a plan to get there where it shows the community really cares and they want to have that vote and they want to elect school board officials?
Well, you raise a very interesting question. And for certain, we want to try as much as possible to have as high a voter turnout as possible. Let's remember the context, though. When the elections took place in 2020, it was in the middle of COVID. The government was shutting things down, but forcing us to have an election. Mm-hmm. They had to push the date of the election twice. They imposed all of these hurdles, and this was just out of a Court of Appeal decision that preserved the old election model, and we had 10 days to organize elections. That's not a model for success. Obviously, the turnout was extremely low, and the number of contested seats was also extremely low, and many people were acclaimed. So, it's good and it's healthy for democracy that we have candidates. It's healthy that we have elections. But the government has an obligation to ensure that people are able to exercise their rights. They have to clean up the electoral list so that the electoral list consists of English-speaking Quebecers and not leave English-speaking Quebecers off the list to have to go through these hurdles in order to get on. Yeah. We need polling stations that are not an hour and a half away, and that may not be a challenge so much in Montreal, but it is in the regions where people have to drive 3 hours to go and vote. I mean, that's not healthy.
Joe,
yeah.
Just because we're out of time, but just based on what you said, right? And school board elections, because you know what? China and Russia, they're probably not going to try and hack it. School board elections, let's put it on an app and put it online. Joe, come back. Let's keep this discussion going, because whenever we get to the next time we have elections, I'll totally be part of the solution to get people out there. Like, I'd love to make sure it's a focus for the English community, okay?
Yeah. And by the way, I'm all for looking at different models than in person, through an app, mail-in ballots, phone with a passcode. All of that is something that they should be looking at, and it would increase turnout definitely.
Of all things, and Joe, let's just go all to the max here. Make it an app and make it like swipe right and swipe left like Tinder, for crying out loud. Just do anything to get the turnout out there. Joe, be well. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Joe Ortona is chair of the English Montreal School Board.